Mythos Busters, investigating the mystery, monsters, and madness of Arkham Horror, the card game.
Hello and welcome to the Mythos Busters podcast. This is episode 114, and I, as always, am Nick, but not as always, I'm kind of running the show tonight. We are short Sean, and we are short Scott, which means it's just Ian and I, the two, I would say the most serious, the ones who take the job the most serious of the cast.
Sure.
Would you agree, Ian?
Sure. We cut out the S names were just ni or in, I guess.
Yeah. Remove S and all you got is in. That's. I just realized that our initials are the podcast initials spell sins. So that's.
We do have many sins.
Yeah, do with that what you will, dear listener. So it's just Ian and I, but we still have a very exciting show planned for you. We're going to talk about patron stuff as usual. We have a little bit of news regarding an event coming up in Roseville. And then we're also going to talk about our main topic tonight, our main Tupac, which is, of course, deck building for off-class. And how do you go about it? What are the different ways to approach it? And how we personally like to do it. So first off, I'm going to remind everybody about BusterCon. It is a thing. It is official, and now it's on the books. It will be happening 2022, the weekend of May 12th through May 15th. So Mark those dates on your calendars. Yeah, it is. I still can't believe that it's an actual thing. But thank you to everybody who made this possible. I mean, the event hasn't happened. It could be a train wreck. Knowing us, it probably will be a train wreck. But still, thank you so much for at least giving us the opportunity to wreck this train.
Yes.
It will be held at, as a reminder, it will be held at the Game Center, or FFZ, in Roseville, Minnesota. FFZ is not an official moniker. It's just one that we've added to it because it's fun. Don't you mean
Roseville?
Oh, no. You're right. You're so right. I do mean that. Now and forever. So that's going to be in Roseville, Minnesota. We are booking a hotel block. We're still working on the details of that, but maybe hold off on booking your rooms or hotels until you hear more details from us regarding that. And then, also, we've announced it on our Discord, but we haven't announced it officially on the podcast yet. The Iron Man event, the Dream Eaters Iron Man event, will be held at BusterCon 2022. We still don't know exactly what form, if any, Arkham Knights will be taking, so we're just going to go ahead and move Iron Man to the event that we know is going to happen. And we hope that you guys will still join us for that. And obviously, as always, if you're not able to make BusterCon for whatever reason, you're still very much welcome to do Iron Man at your own, at a game store, or at your own home, or whatever works best for you. So, and we're still working out the details of how exactly we want Dream Eaters Iron Man to function. Like, because it's the two campaigns, if you need two groups or whatever. I think we're leaning in the direction of each table can approach it however they want, but I think us, the Mythos Busters, I think we're still kind of in discussion as far as how exactly we're going to approach it. Am I right in that assumption, Ian?
Yeah, we haven't nailed anything down firmly. I think most of us want to do all of the scenarios, but whether we're going to team up with another group to do the interaction parts or what, we kind of still need to figure out that. Right. Or whether we're going to interact with ourselves. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
I think in true Mythos Busters fashion, we'll just interact with ourselves.
Yes. There's still kind of quite a few details to work out, obviously, but yeah, we do want to integrate some virtual options for those who can't make it. The good thing is, since we're in full control, you all have a healthy 8 months notice for BusterCon, which is kind of unprecedented in Iron Man terms.
Oh, 100%. You have 8 months as opposed to the 4 weeks that you normally get for Arkham Knights. So,
Yeah, true story.
Yeah, so that's a good thing at least. So like I said, May 12th through May 15th, 2022 in Roseville, Minnesota. And then continue to watch the podcast, follow Discord, or follow our website for details regarding the hotel block that we are reserving. And it is a hotel that is nearby as well. So it's not one that you're going to have to take like a really long Uber trip or whatever to and from. It's relatively close if I remember right. But Scott's in charge of that, so I don't necessarily want to speak for him, despite having just done that. So anyway, let's move on and check in with our hosts. So Ian, what Arkham have you been playing lately?
I've actually been playing a bit more than last time, although I haven't quite gotten up to my full Arkham usual routine that's been disrupted lately. But I have gotten a few games in. I finally gave a Lola standalone build that I've had trickling through my mind for a while. I finally gave it a try. And this is basically the Lola build that takes all the kind of 4-stat boosters. So Dark Horse, Crystalline Elder Sign, the Rogue one that I don't remember how our pronunciation got corrected on that one. The Promise Rogue one.
Right.
So those three, and yeah, so it's basically just trying to get those three out, and the rest is a lot of skills. And I took it against Blob solo, which is that's not necessarily an easy go. Playing Blob solo, and she was successful. She did it, killed the Blob.
Nice.
So she got 2 of the 3 out. She didn't get the Crystalline Elder Sign out, and my hunch is that's probably like what that deck will do consistently is get 2 of the 3 out.
Right.
She did stall out a little bit here and there. I wish I would have gotten the last one out. But again, she was successful mostly because of the Time Worn brand. You know, it's neutral, gets the job done. And the way the deck works, it's just kind of built to avoid her Crisis of Identity, because you really just need to avoid Survivor or Rogue because you don't want to get rid of your main assets. But like if I'm in Seeker, I usually don't really have any Seeker assets, or Mystic, for example. So yeah, kind of one of the more fun Lola builds I've played. I think I wanna try it some more. I don't know how it would work in campaign because it would take a lot of XP to get to like where that build wants to be.
Probably not one you want to take through Dunwich when you're getting 2 to 4 experience per session.
No, definitely not. For sure.
Do you have that deck list on Arkham DB?
Yeah, I can pop that in the chat.
You should link it, and then I'll also include it in the show notes. I know that Lola is one that comes up not regularly, but every time she comes up, there's always this moment where it's like what does a build look like for Lola now? And it's always changing. And I talked about how I did the tarot one a while ago. I know you did tarot as well. And that worked. Did you pair this build with anybody, or did you run true solo?
No, it was just straight up true solo.
Oh, wow.
I was curious. Well, I originally built it for 4-player because I was going to run it in one of our 4-player streams. And then I was like, no, I'm kind of curious how it works solo, so I made some tweaks. It has a couple cards in there that I actually might change. Like, there were a couple of cards where I was like, okay, that's more of a multiplayer card, but I'll just keep it in there to see how it goes. Like Deduction, for example, is something that I don't often run in true solo.
Sure.
But, you know, that card still has use because you always get a couple of 2 clue locations, even in solo. Yeah.
What did you run for, like, covering distance? Because Blob is a big map, and solo, that can... I feel like... I haven't played it true solo, but I feel like you can get bogged down just running from location to location.
Yeah, pretty much a shortcut. Scott's favorite card. So nothing really big in terms of movement. But I think she was just able to be efficient enough in getting clues, and there wasn't as much happening. Like, because when I play Blob in multiplayer, it just tends to be a big mess after a while, because you're just drawing through so many encounter cards. There's just little bloblings everywhere. And that didn't happen as much in true solo, so she was able to stay on top of it even if she didn't have a ton of movement.
Nice. Well, that's cool. Oh, nice.
Oh.
And you're running 4 permanents as well. That's gold for Lola.
Yeah, I tend to always like Studious and Lola. I ran that in the Tarot build I ran before too. Just because she has that little bit of a bigger deck size, and especially if you're trying to have a build that relies on a few cards.
Right.
And then I tried out a card, another one of Scott's favorite cards. I should call this the Scott's favorite cards deck. Intrepid. I ran Intrepid.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
And it wasn't bad. I'm still not saying it's like the greatest card around, but in this particular build, because it was all about like passive boost, like
right,
it did some work.
Yeah, Intrepid it strikes me as kind of like the well, it's maybe a little more useful than True Understanding, but it's kind of in that wheelhouse where most of the time you're gonna just ignore it, but every so often you look at it, like with a very specific build, you look at it and you go like, well, maybe like this has some use. But unfortunately, every time I've included Trepid, it's one of the first ones that gets cut. So I'm glad that you got some use out of it. I think Lola, yeah, like you said, Lola's a great one for that because you're getting +3.
Yeah.
It's just you just got to make sure that you're Guardian during the Mythos phase.
Yeah, I think you gotta kind of keep an eye on Guardian, which is good because this deck has 0 Guardian assets, so
right.
I kind of like to stay in Guardian a lot of the times, because I might want to play Intrepid or Vicious Blow, but if Crisis Identity hits, like who cares? It's not gonna take anything out. But
that's very, I like that a lot. Like the only Guardian asset you have is the level 0 Enchanted Blade.
Right? Yeah. I did forget about that. Yeah, there is the Enchanted Blade, which could get hit, but yeah, there's usually at least one class that's kind of off class that, like if I have the Time Worn Brand out and not the Enchanted Blade, and then I got Dr. Ellie Horowitz to grab either the Time Worn Brand or the Elder Sign, hopefully.
Yep, nice.
Or
I like this build a lot. I very often when I build Lola, well, very often, the last few times I built Lola, I choose her third, what do you call it? Third role, or not role, her third class. That's what, we're going to use that word a lot today. I shouldn't forget it. Her third class, to be my event only class. And that's the one where I try to make sure I'm on that. And usually it ends up being Mystic, because Mystic has the most events that can interact with the Mythos phase, and the most skills that are useful during the Mythos phase, generally. So I usually build her with, Guardian Seeker or Rogue Seeker or whatever, and then Mystic is always the third, and it's just events, so that I can position myself so that if I do draw Crisis of Identity at the end of my turn, it's not going to wipe anything off the table. But I like what you did here, where you built a Lola deck, and then all you did was you added a 4th class. That's just a very small handful of cards, it looks like. Oh no, never mind. The 4th class is Mystic, and it's just the one. So you did the exact same thing that I do. Yep. You just did Guardian instead of Mystic. Yeah.
Right.
That's nice. Awesome.
Yeah, I do think I might swap Enchanted Blade out because it was a little bit awkward. Like, it kind of messes up, like, sometimes what class I want to stick on. So
sure.
I might throw in a Survivor weapon because I know pretty much I never want to be in Survivor because I don't want Dark Horse to go away. But then the problem is then I would have to be in Survivor to use that weapon. So I don't know. It's
What about a rogue weapon?
Tough.
I mean, then you're looking at losing Geish, however you say that word. Gish. I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah.
There's not really a Seeker weapon that you can do. You're really just looking at Guardian or Rogue.
Yeah, maybe it would have to be a Guardian weapon because then I can be in Guardian and that asset might go away, but at least it's not hitting any of my big 3.
Right.
So I'm not sure.
What were you testing at for combat generally?
Generally, let's see. So I had both our Promise card and Dark Horse. I was at 5 and then +2 from Time Lord Brand. So I was at base 7 most of the game.
Oh, okay.
which isn't bad. And then, I had plenty of skills and like icons in there, so
sure. Well, I was thinking if your combat's pretty high, why not just run like the 32? And if you do the leveled up one, that's one that you can bounce back. Well, you can't bounce. You can bounce it back to your hand before, like at the end of your turn.
True. Yeah.
I don't know.
That's a decent idea. Yeah.
And what was the promise that you made?
Oh, promise not to draw because I still needed to play some events, and I definitely need to commit. But in general, like once I was at the point of putting it down, I didn't really need to draw. Mm-hmm. I think the main card that kind of X's out is my deep knowledge that I have in there to draw cards, but
sure,
that's fine. That card is mostly there, so I can quickly get my booster assets out. So if they're already out, then that's fine. I'll just commit it for icons instead of drawing.
Nice. Also, I think the draw of those three is generally the least impactful. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like saying I will not play, holy shit, what are you doing to yourself? And saying I will not commit, that's kind of build dependent. Whereas I think every deck can get to the point where they can say I will not draw and usually be fine. So
yeah, the biggest problem you get into is that if you do the I will not draw, then it's kind of you can't use your base neutral skills like perception and overpower and man decks anymore.
Oh, sure.
So it's tough. So you kind of have to be certain that at the point that you play that down and make that promise that your base skills are high enough that you can kind of, or you've kind of, I think when like in this particular game that I had already committed a lot of those already. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'm not going to see many more of those.
Sure. Yeah, I can see that.
So I think the deck list still needs some tweaking to get around some of those weirdness, but overall it did well, so I think it's something to build on.
Nice. I like it.
I know Edge of the Earth has some Lola cards.
Yes.
So I'll be excited to dive into that when we eventually get our investigator expansion, like a month after the rest of the world.
I'm still waiting for Return to Circle Undone. I'm supposed to get that in early October. And I'm excited for what that will do for Lola, just with the tarot stuff. But Edge of the Earth as well. We're getting 2 big releases in a row that are both going to help boost Lola. So that'll be fun to see what builds come out of both of those.
The age of man is over. It's now the age of Lola.
The age of the actor has come. For my part, all I've done is I played 1 game of Achievement Hunter, and that's been recorded and released. So if you follow our RSS feed, you've heard that already. That was episode 18, despite me saying at the beginning of the episode that it was episode 17. I always lose track of the count on there. But that was Ashcan Pete at Return to the Miskatonic Museum. And that was one of those situations where I don't want to spoil a whole lot, but I killed the hunting horror like 2 times early on, so he's got those 2 resources, and then I drew the encounter card that just adds one of the new ones in Return to that just adds a resource to Shadow Spawn, and then you put the card in the victory display. Yeah, so he got pretty big, like unexpectedly fast. So I kind of had to then evade, but luckily this build of Ashcan is positioned well enough to both fight and evade decently depending on the cards I have out, and so I was able to succeed. Nice. Still haven't, still totally on track with him for the achievements for this campaign. The one that's going to be the big, like, will it or will it, well, there's 2 really that I'm still uncertain of, and that's if I can successfully lose Duke during Blood on the Altar.
Yeah, that's
that one's a big totally. And then the other one is if I can successfully prevent all broods, don't let any of the broods escape into the wilderness in Undimensioned Unseen.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun. But it's still really fun. I mean, it's Dunwich. It's kind of like old reliable at this point. Like, it doesn't have a whole lot of tricks, which is really cool, kind of going in with that known quantity. And like I said before, this is the first time that I've saved Peter Clover when I played House Always Wins. So I'm excited to see not only how that affects later scenarios, but also what Return to does, because I know there's a certain story asset that comes into play or that you get control of, being Naomi, so that'll be a lot of fun too.
Yeah, I'm very jealous because I've tried to get her a couple times and haven't been able to.
We'll see.
It's on my bucket list.
Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, I mean, it's really fun. I took inspiration from the last time that you talked about building for Ashcan, and I went kind of Battle Mage Ashcan, so really playing on the high willpower, Moonstone, upgraded Peter Sylvester, so rocking 5 will, 5 agility most of the time, and then leveraging that willpower with spells, and in this case with Sword Cane. I'm running Sword Cane in Ashcan, which Sword Cane's awesome, but it doesn't get you the damage boost, so unfortunately it's not the end-all be-all for, weapons for this deck, but it is really nice.
Yeah.
A lot of fun. I'm excited to get... I was going to say I'm excited to get back to it, but I remember the next scenario is Essex County Express. So
have fun with that one.
Return to softens the blow a little bit, but only a little bit.
Yeah, and in some ways it adds a different blow.
Yeah.
And having that boss chase after. Yeah. I don't know what your experience has been, but I feel like Return to Dunwich in general is like the biggest difficulty boost of the returns. Like, I've played through the other returns at least once, except for Circle and Den, which I'm just starting on. And there's some little difficulty increases here and there, but it's mostly just adding like more variety and different stuff.
Yeah.
But Dunwich was the most where I feel like it tweaked the difficulty up a little bit on certain... Not every scenario, but a lot of... Like, Miskatonic Museum's one where... In the original version, I just usually blitz that scenario, and I keep having really bad luck in the return version. Like, I've lost more often than I've won.
That was one thing I commented on in the recording, was that the return version adds a card, because, okay, the whole thing with the hunting horror is that, yeah, his combat and his evade go up with the resources, and his health, obviously, but he doesn't hit any harder. He's still just hitting for 1/1. Whereas with Return to, he gets those cards that attach to him, Dark Bidding or whatever it's called, that when he hits you for an additional 1/1, but then you discard the card. And if you get both of those, then suddenly he could be like a 6-fight swinging for 3/3, like, holy crap. So I can totally see it. Yeah, like, suddenly he becomes a much bigger threat. But you're right, like, the vanilla version of Miskatonic Museum, you could pretty much sleep through it. Like, it's like, it doesn't require a lot of effort with the current card pool. So I would agree that Dunwich seems like it ramps up the difficulty a bit more. Forgotten Age, like, we just have the 3, right? Yeah. Forgotten Age was, like, that was difficult to begin with, so this felt like it was more smoothing the curve out. Yeah. More than anything. And Carcosa was just like... I think Carcosa was the coolest, with the Return to box, because that's just adding, like you said, variety. Like, it's just little differences here and there. Whereas Dunwich, it did feel like they'd grabbed the knob and cranked it a couple of notches.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, so that's all I've had time to play. My other ongoing campaign is my Patrice and Akachi Return to Dunwich campaign as well, but unfortunately I haven't gotten back to them. I can attest to what Sean talked about previously, which is playing Patrice and Return to Dunwich. That is good
times.
It's holy cow! Like, you're riding the line, and it's like, quick, get me to cycle through my deck before Beyond the Veil comes out. So it's fun though.
Play faster. She's just whittling away at her violin.
Exactly. All right. But moving on, just as a quick reminder to everybody, we have retired. We have sunset the weekly voicemail prompt. But that doesn't mean we don't want to stop. That doesn't mean we want to stop hearing from you guys. Definitely still try and, reach out to us. If you have something that you want us to discuss on an episode, if you have what you think is maybe an unpopular opinion about something in Arkham, or if you just want to tell us about something that we screwed up, call in and let us know. Our voicemail number is 203-493-MYTH. That's 203-493-6984. Or if you're on mobile on Facebook, you can just click the call button on our Facebook page. We'll play your voicemail, live on the podcast recording, and then we'll discuss it. So if you got anything you want us to talk about, feel free to give us a call and send a voicemail in. Or as Sean says, if you want to record a message and then send it to us, you can do that as well. So with that out of the way, Ian, what patron stuff do we have going on today?
Sure. So first off, thanks to our board members. That's Chris B, Chris H, and Chris M, our conglomeration of Chris's. Morton, Jared, Ian, Kyle, Philip, Dave, Abilio, Jesse, Chad, and Robert. Thanks so much for your support of the podcast. And we do have a special shout out to a random patron this time around, and that goes to Daniel Thomas Jordan. Thanks, Daniel, for your support as well. A couple of small things. Make sure you check out mythosmerch.com. We always try to remind you because we got some cool stuff there. And we'd love to see any pictures you have of you wearing it in the wild. And if you have any stories of someone actually recognizing your gear as Mythosbusters gear, you'll probably make our year if you tell us about it. So the only other thing is we do have a brand new job title hot off the HR press to give out. And this is for Kimberly Gaddy. Kimberly, you are taking on the very important title of Director of Yeti Relations. Yeah, that's going to be very important as we head to the edge of the earth.
Yeah, we've left that position unfilled for the longest time, but now seeing where we're going, it's like, we better get someone on that.
The last person who had that position, I think their arms got pulled out of their sockets, and
I mean, we don't have to talk about that now. Like
Yetis are basically snow Wookiees, right? Is that how it works?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, let's ignore that the Wampa exists.
Yes.
But that's basically just a Yeti, I guess.
Yeah, so the Wampa's basically a Yeti. True.
And a Yeti is a snow Wookiee, so okay, great.
Yes.
Awesome.
In this TED Talk, I will.
Oh, jeez. All right. News. For news this week, we do have one new article from FFG. It's just an announcement. They heard that we announced BusterCon, and they wanted to announce their own con sooner than BusterCon, but unfortunately, it's not Arkham Knights. It is Pop-Up Gen Con at the Game Center in Roseville, Minnesota. Obviously, it's at that venue, and they have a schedule of events, and that's going on Friday, September 17th, and Saturday, September 18th. There's a new Arkham scenario, a new epic multiplayer Arkham scenario. I'm unfortunately unable to make it because, I mean, that's already, like, we're recording and it's this week that it's happening, excuse me, so yeah. And I know you're not able to, and I know Scott is barely staying afloat as far as the schedule
yes,
goes.
Accurate.
But I do believe that Sean and maybe Justin are going to try and get out there and experience the scenario and see what else there is going on. But obviously, there's all sorts of FFG games that are on display here. There's the Lord of the Rings Hunt for the Dreadnought scenario with Jeremy Zwern. There's, like I said, the Arkham Horror scenario. There's Marvel Champions and Journeys of Middle-earth Learn to Play. And then there's a bunch of demo tables, including Unfathomable, Descent Legends of the Dark. Those are both new titles. Is Unfathomable actually released? I don't think it is yet, is it?
I don't remember. I don't think so. I haven't heard
I don't think it is
talk
either.
about it, but
I don't remember
possible.
either, though. I mean, I'm interested, but only because I think I would like the format. I'm not necessarily interested in buying another, like, 5-person board game when I only play with myself.
Yeah.
So, Prince Lone Star is saying, I didn't realize we had royalty in chat. Apologies, Your Highness. But Prince Lone Star is saying, I don't think it's out yet. Yeah, I don't think it is either. But anyway, if you want to have the chance to play that, that's this coming weekend, September 17th and 18th at FFC.
I think it's a sign of how important and huge Arkham Horror the card game is to FFG. At least this is how I'm choosing to read it. Is that in that whole pop-up, the only game that's getting like a new scenario is Arkham Horror. Like, we're getting a new one. Lord of the Rings is using last year's scenario, which, makes sense because the game has pretty much sunset, and no one got a chance to play that one at last year's Gen Con because there wasn't Gen Con. And Marvel Champions is just like a learn to play, but Arkham Horror's got a brand spanking new scenario.
Yeah.
I have no idea what it is, but I'm excited to find out.
Right. And it's not like it's last year's scenario that's finally getting seen, in the epic multiplayer format, because last year's was War of the Outer Gods, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Yeah. So this is something totally new. That is really exciting. And it's unfortunate that only 2 of the 5, 6 including Tom, Mythos Busters are going to be able to make it to that event.
Yeah.
But we've all already told Sean to try and snag us what he can. So hopefully we'll be able to get that in hand. And I mean, maybe we'll be able to play it online at some point.
Yep. Yeah, I'm sure we will try.
Right.
I'm sure the community will probably organize a big play of it, because it sounds like it's another kind of blob epic multiplayer. So
right.
I know the community has done big blob games in the past, for example.
Yeah. All right. Well, that closes off all of our preamble stuff. So let's go ahead and move into our main Tupac, which is building for an investigator's off class. Ian, you proposed this topic. So do you want to take the lead on it, or do you want me to go through the bullet points I got here?
Sure. I can take the lead. Yeah, so the whole idea behind this topic is really just thinking about, usually, I guess I'll speak for myself, but I know I see this in other people talking about deck building. The first thing that pops up into mind when you're thinking about deck building, like say, I need to build a Skids deck, or Windy, or Daisy, or whoever, is obviously you think of your primary class. What Seeker cards can I include? What Rogue cards? But the way that Arkham is built, each investigator kind of has access to some kind of off class that's not their primary class. The details vary. But it's actually that off class that gives the real flavor to these decks, because otherwise everyone, all rogue decks would just look the same, right? If you just had the primary. So it's really the off class that adds that flavor. So really just thinking about what's the best way to leverage those off classes and what kind of cards we like to use. So I guess the first big question that I'll pose to you and both of us, I guess, is do you usually use the off class to kind of complement your main class's strengths, or to kind of shore up your class's weaknesses? And I guess when I say class, that could also mean the investigator themselves. Like,
right.
Are you mostly looking to leverage it to build up what you're good at, or to cover for what you're bad at?
Both, I think. But I think oftentimes I probably tend to shore up weaknesses a little more often than not. And that's not unique to the off class. I think that's something I do regardless of class composition.
Sure.
But playing true solo has really taught me to be like, Skids is a perfect example. Rogue and Guardian and low will. And neither Rogue nor Guardian have a whole lot, at least for a while, they didn't have a whole lot for will buffing. So I always told myself, like, all right, the first 2 experience I get, or the first 4 experience I get, I'm getting police badge. Because not only is that giving me a constant will boost, but then it also plays into one of my favorite ways to play Skids, which is just as many actions as I can take in a turn.
Right.
So I think I kind of do a little bit of both, but I probably lean more to, because I also think about like Roland, and one of the cards, it may not always make it into the final build, but it's always in the starting build for Roland, is logical reasoning, because he's only rocking 5 sanity. So having that 2 resource cost remove 2 horror, that's really useful. So yeah, I think I go a little bit of both. How about you, Ian?
It's tough because I feel like, as with most things, it depends on the investigator. But I think I lean a little more towards covering for the weaknesses, because in theory, like, your primary class should be supporting whatever you're trying to do.
Right.
Otherwise, there's something weird going on, which does happen. But yeah, I'm usually trying to reach into that other class, or maybe even we're going to refer to like everything that's not your class as off class, but it might be like a trait or something like trick and not a whole class. But in general, when I'm kind of dabbling into that pool that's not my class, I'm trying to look for things that I can't get from my main class. It's mostly what I'm looking to do. It could depend though. Like there might be times where you're just really looking to try a weird deck build and try to build some combos, string some combos together, and that's something that can happen. And sometimes it depends on multiplayer versus solo too. Like in solo, it's more like I just have a picture in my head of like, okay, I need to do this much investigating and get this much clues, and I need to do this much fighting and be able to deal this much damage. So across everything that I have access to, what are like the best options for that?
Yeah, I do that, again, the true solo mindset. Even though I play more two-handed now than I play true solo, I still build like I'm building for true solo because I'll take my deck, and once I get it to the point where I'm struggling to figure out what to cut, so at around like 36, 38 cards, those last few cuts that I just have trouble making, I separate the cards into 3 piles, and those piles are investigation or clue gathering, enemy management, and then utility. And then I just try and get those piles as equal as possible is what I do. And so, yeah, a lot of times if I'm looking at like, oh, I only have 4 cards for clues, but I have 10 cards for enemies, then I'll be like, okay, well, obviously I missed something here. Let's look at my off class and see what they have access for clues. And it's like, oh, okay, there are these rogue cards that get clues that are really great. Like there's intel report or surveillance, under surveillance, or like for Guardian, there's, scene of the crime. We can grab that, so that sort of thing. So that's what I usually do is like when I notice that I'm lacking in a certain area, then I go, okay, there's something that my brain missed in building this deck. I'll immediately go to the off class then and kind of look for something that might help. Usually, I tend, and again, this changes on the investigator, but I tend to go more event heavy in the off class or more skill heavy, whereas the assets are often core class, like the main class. I don't know why that is.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of whether that's true for me as well, and I think sometimes it is. It just depends on investigator. Right. I feel like when I'm playing a mystic for sure, because you're tending to just use a lot of spells that leverage your willpower, so you kind of have to have just a lot of purple assets, and then whatever off classes is probably more so some events and skills that I'm throwing in there for mystics. So kind of depends.
Yeah.
Do you tend to, we kind of talked a little bit about our general approach, but do you also tend to just like, let me just grab the best cards from the off class I have access to, regardless of who I'm playing? Or are you more like hitting it with a surgical scalpel and just trying to pull the cards that really speak to your investigator, regardless of whether they're like gonna make anyone's top 10 best classes for that card list?
Okay, if I'm off class mystic, I always grab premonition.
Sure.
If I'm off class seeker, I always grab shortcut.
Sure.
Or working a hunch sometimes. Off class Myfftic. Yeah, thanks for catching that. So I do tend to, I guess what would be the Guardian? If I'm off class Guardian, what do I go for? I think that's more investigator dependent, because then you're looking at like, what's their combat, and can they leverage the weapons, or do they have to use more of the tricky stuff? So, to a degree, I do kind of go for those auto includes a little bit, or at least what I see as auto includes. I know Scott would say that I'm overvaluing shortcut, but yes. Every time it's in my hand, I find a use for it. So I don't know what the deal is. But at the same time, again, like I mentioned earlier, like I like to feel like I have the weaknesses or the shortcomings of the investigator, kind of have an answer for them. And off classes usually offer some sort of answer for that. So yes and no.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, there's definitely cards that I just kind of lean towards taking from a class, but it's more like over time I kind of come up with like a short list of cards for particular investigators. Like,
Right.
for example, when I'm building Finn, which I often do, I'm like, okay, logical reasoning and
Yes.
Seeker, like I'm gonna pull that immediately. But with other investigators with Seeker access, I don't necessarily always or even often take logical reasoning. So
Sure.
just heavily investigator dependent, of course, but there are certain cards which we'll talk a little bit more about of like what are the hot picks. On a side note, I really want someone to create a custom art where it's Scott in the art of Shortcut.
Except for he's going back into the manhole cover, like he's going back down into the sewers. You talk about how you sort of built up like a list of auto includes for the investigator and not necessarily for the class. I feel like I've done that as well. And I feel like Carolyn has the longest list of auto includes. Like I need to, like I have like a list of 10 cards where I'm like, these have to be in my Carolyn deck. It's like, all right, Forbidden Knowledge, Pete Sylvester, Meat Cleaver. You know, like the list just goes on and on for her. I really feel like that's an investigator that I'm excited to see what new cards come out that kind of expand her play. And she has a weird off class. Like you get 10 or 15 combined level 0 of 2 different, like it's so I always have to read it 2 or 3 times when I'm building for her.
There's certain investigators I can never remember their deck building because it's so intricate. Like her and Marie, who has like 3 different quote unquote off classes. And
is it Marie or is it Akachi who can't go up to level 5 Mystic? I think it's Akachi.
Don't remember.
One of them can't take all the Mystic cards, but they can take a selection of them that fit this trait or whatever. You know, like that kind of stuff is always, that throws me for a loop because I'm like, but you're purple. Why can't like take the, you know, whatever.
Yeah. Carolyn is one I haven't played in a while. I need to give her a try again. So let's kind of go, before we dive into the investigators, let's talk about classes, because we kind of talk generally, but taking each class at a time, like what does it give you as an off class, and if there's any particular off class cards that you immediately think of. So we'll start with Rogue for no particular reason.
I would say you're out of order on this lineup, but I'll let it slide.
Actually, no, I don't want to do Rogue because I think it's trickier. Let's start with the easier ones first. Guardian. What does Guardian give you?
Well, Guardian is obviously all about enemy management, and then their secondary strength is like keeping people alive. So you're really looking at things to either deal damage or make enemies not so taxing. Ultimately, so Big Kahuna brings up dodge. In chat, dodge is great. That's a great off class. One of my favorite off class Guardian cards is Guard Dog, because that's one that with those low health enemies you can keep doing what you're doing and not lose momentum with Guard Dog. So they're great. But yeah, you're really looking with Guardian. You're looking at mainly enemy management, and then secondary is just keeping yourself alive. So.
Yeah, I definitely agree on those. So, Killing Stuff is a time and honored Guardian tradition, and yeah, it's that Guardian has a lot of horror and damage healing compared to a lot of the other classes.
Right,
probably has the most, right?
Oh, I'm pretty sure. I mean, core set they had first aid, which does both.
And now is things like Second Wind and Hallowed Mirror is an off-class card.
Yeah, Hallowed Mirror is so good.
Is one of the better healing options out there. So thinking about cards, Dodge I don't take as much as I used to, but I think it's still a very good kind of off-class option. I just tend to run a lot more Soaks instead these days instead of Dodge, but that's my own particular thing. I'm trying to think of And also in the early life of the game, I tended to lean on, if I had off-class Guardian access, I used to lean a lot more on that to get my weapons, because a lot of the other classes, especially Rogue, had crap weapons in the early life of the game.
Yep.
But now most classes have gotten better weapon options. So now that I have Guardian access, I don't tend, like, it used to be like, okay, 45 automatic, throw it in there, throw it in my skids deck. And now I don't find myself doing that as much. I still can do it sometimes. I'm trying to think of what are some other... Yeah, so I think like healing options, because those are hard to get in other classes. Viscous Blow, good old Vicious Blow is still a good option unless I'm not really fighting with my fist.
Inspiring Presence is a good one if you're running allies who exhaust to do an effect. Inspiring Presence is a good one to get extra mileage out of them. I really like that. Super Toasty and chat brings up Daring. That's a good one.
Yeah, a lot of the Guardian skills are pretty interesting, pretty good. So I do tend to pull some of those in if it makes sense for what I'm doing. Are there any Guardian ally? I know you mentioned Guard Dog, but like Guardian, because the ally question really defines a lot of decks. So when thinking about off-class Guardian, are there any other Guardian allies that you really think about for off-class?
Guard Dog is really like I think Guard Dog is the best for just universal ally out of Guardian. Like any deck can find use for Guard Dog, I think. But branching away from that, like Alice Luxley gives you the int boost, but I think any class that is looking for a static int boost has better options in their home class, probably. Like Mystic has Alyssa Graham, and that plays more to Mystic sensibilities, and Seeker obviously has Dr. Milan. So Alice, I don't think so. What are the other options for level 0 allies in Guardian? I think it's just Beat Cop then. Oh, and gosh, what's the ally who fetches an item? That's probably the next best thing. Tetsuo, thank you, Super Toasty. Tetsuo Mori, yeah. So I think Guard Dog and then Tetsuo Mori is probably the second one, because the fact that he can soak for anybody at the location and then he responds after he dies by grabbing an item, fetching an item from the top 6 or 9 of your deck, like that's super good, regardless of who you are, because everybody loves items, right? Psychopath brings up Greta. Yeah, I think, yeah. But Greta, again, like she's the ally that's when you defeat an enemy, you can get a free clue. And if Guardian is your off class, I mean, you're still going to want to be defeating an enemy. Yeah, she's also really expensive. So I would probably say Guardian and Tetsuo are probably the two best.
Yeah, I do think Tetsuo is one that are probably drawn just as anything that can fetch stuff for me is good. But other than that, I don't think I lean on the Guardian allies too much as off class.
Yeah, that's the thing is like allies are such a tricky business because every class has such a good selection of level 0 allies for the most part, and they all play to a specific way of how you play that class. So, like, Seeker has Eldritch Sophist, Dr. Milan, Mr. Rook, and they all play very differently, and they're all gonna do different Seeker-y things. So if you're a Seeker, even if you're like Joe Diamond, and you're a Seeker who's off-class Guardian, you're probably still gonna have Mr. Rook or Dr. Milan, and you might have in there a Guardian or a Tetsuo or something as well. So the allies are so, like, I think they symbolize their home class more than anyone else. Symbolize isn't a good word. Represent their home class more than any other card type. So it's a little tough to look for strong off-class options in those.
Yeah, agreed. Are there any, like, underrated Guardian cards that you can think of that, well, maybe not even underrated, but they're the cards that aren't necessarily the big auto includes that a lot of people include that you do use in off class a lot of times? Any like particular special favorites for you?
Yeah, survival knife. Big Kahuna brings up in chat. That was the first one that came to mind for me was survival knife. It one hand, and it gives you a free reaction to an enemy attack, and it's a pretty good reaction. Like survival knife is great, especially even if you just have like 3 combat or even 2, depending on the difficulty you're playing on. That reaction fight test from survival knife can be really good. Psychopath brings up Fool Me Once. I've run Fool Me Once only a couple times, and that's another tough one because so many classes. I think every class now has some sort of treachery cancellation, except for Rogue. I think Rogue is the only one who doesn't. And Fool Me Once isn't like it's Mystic has better options. And I would say Survivor has better options. So I guess I could see Fool Me Once coming in there. I can't think of anything other than those. Like Survival Life jumped up to me immediately. Scene of the Crime I like to do. Oh,
yeah, Scene of the Crime. Although I imagine that's probably one that a lot of people go to, but yeah, probably. that's one that particularly speaks to me for sure. That's just such a good clue finding. I think On the Hunt is a card that I don't use a ton, but it is one that I have used either for particular scenarios or for particular investigators.
Yeah.
That are just, especially some of my more fighty rogues who are like, instead of getting a treachery, why not just get an enemy?
Right.
So that one works well. I'm trying to think what else. It's not one I use a ton, but I think Teamwork is interesting for 4-player games. Because it's one of those effects that you can't really get in a lot of classes. So I can see that as being something you grab in off class.
Have you run Intrepid in? I mean, you just talked about it in Lola. But I'm trying to think of what investigators could take Intrepid that would like it, or like that would make use out of it. Jim Culver could.
I'm not sure because that might have been like the second or third time I've ever used Intrepid in a deck.
Oh, Diana could take it, I guess.
Sure.
But I don't know if it's really worth it for... Well, it might be. I don't know. If you're getting up to 6 willpower, it probably isn't worth it for her.
Yeah, if someone else is doing the kind of like passive boost build, I guess.
Right. Super Toasty is asking what we think of Solemn Vow. That seems like that'd be another good one that would be an off class, but at the same time, like, what is that? Okay, so you play that one under someone else's control, and then it lets you soak for them, or I forget how that one actually works. I honestly have never played Solemn Vow because I just feel like there's better options for soaking.
Yeah, you basically play it on someone else, and then you become the damage sponge that they can transfer damage to. So I've used it in Calvin as an off-class card, for example, because that just kind of makes sense.
Right.
And I'm trying to think. I think that's kind of mostly where I used it. Yeah, I see someone mentioning it in chat that they used it in Tommy. I think that's the other time I've used.
Yeah, that'd be really good in Tommy.
Obviously, that's not an off class for him, but it's worth mentioning. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next class then. Let's do the other kind of straightforward class next. Let's do Seeker.
Sure.
So, what does Seeker give you as an off class?
Clues.
Very efficient
draw.
Clues, yeah. Card draw.
And, I mean, they have mobility options, too.
Movement, yeah. You got shortcut. If you can get up to... If you're not stuck at level 0, you can probably get Pathfinder.
Yep. Well, even at level 0 still, there's the Truth Beckons as well that you can get, which is a multi-move. So there are options.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely one of the more mobile classes. Let's see. Is there any? Well, I can tell you what you can't get. Usually, you can't get the the kind of leveled up assets like the stuff you have to research or identify because usually you have to be able to reach up to the higher levels, and off class doesn't let you do that.
Right.
Yeah. So I think Seeker is one of those things where even if your investigator or your primary class is pretty good at investigating, you still are probably going to look at Seeker for some of its investigation stuff anyway.
Yeah.
Just because that's its bread and butter, like little magnifying glass or
mag glass,
deduction, of course.
Deduction, fingerprint kit.
Yeah.
Fingerprint kit is a little more narrow because that has the investigate action on it, so you can't pair it with other stuff. But I mean, even still, it's investigate, get 2 clues 3 times per kit. Like, that's pretty good. Crack the Case, Big Kahuna brings up. Crack the Case is a great resource card.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I love it.
Hawkeye folding camera is an interesting one that I would probably argue is actually better off class than in primary seekers most of the time.
I agree. I only use it in off class, I think. Other than Joe. I use it in Joe Diamond,
So I think that's one of the like dynamite like off class seeker options because it's like again me playing a lot of the low will rogues. I'm like folding camera you say.
Yeah.
Boost my will. What are the other kind of big go-tos for... I mean, again, thinking about allies, like... I think Seeker has some of the big, heavy-hitting allies that you might look to.
Certainly.
Like Christopher Milan, of course, Dr. Milan.
Mr. Rook, too. I know Taboo is a thing, and people play with Taboo. But if you don't, like me, holy crap. Yeah, Milan and Mr. Rook are both... bomb level 0 allies that if you have access to Seeker, it's hard not to look at either of them.
Yeah, there's very few investigators and classes that can't benefit from Milan or Rook.
Right. Yep.
But even some of their more like regular everyday Joe Seeker allies can often be useful in off class too.
Yeah, I think Ellie Horowitz gets a lot of off class play. I know when she came out, the first thing was like, "Ooh, Jim, she can fetch the trumpet." But even more than that, there's a lot of different, like she can fetch the bow because the bow's a relic. There's a lot of stuff that she can get. So if you have access to her, she's essentially 2 free hand slots depending on the item she's getting. So
yeah, her ability is so specific and something that you can't get anywhere else. Like, of course you can get stuff that fetches, but fetching for a relic specifically, and then immediately attaching so you don't have to pay
holds
for
it. Yeah,
and then holds it. Yeah, she's definitely something I look at in off class. Again, if you need a relic, if not, doesn't make sense. But like Malison is another potential off class, just because he's a cheap, good ally who can do something useful.
So, because also, Psychopath is bringing up in chat, and I totally forgot, but yeah, Lab Assistant and Art Student are both great, when played, do a thing, allies. So does Seeker have the most universally good level 0 allies?
Probably.
I think they do.
We can come back around to it once we go through all the classes, but it'll be tough. Yeah, as far as like the most selection of the best level 0 allies for off class, I
think so.
There's a lot to choose from there. Okay, so are there any particular like your pet Seeker cards that you like to include in off class?
I mean, we've already kind of talked about them. Shortcut, working a hunch, and God, I talked about logical reasoning. Like those are 3. Oh, yes. And preposterous sketches, and crack the case. Like there's there's 5 cards right there that are all great off class cards.
Yeah, definitely logical reasoning. That ability to just either heal to or discard a terror card is really good for low will investigators. I mentioned Malison as part of the allies, but he's just a card that I think is really good.
He's so good.
I still can't believe it's one cost.
Right, I know, 1 for 2/2, and a great ability. Like if you're running Roland,
if he was blank and 1 for 2/2,
that still is pretty good.
There was another one that I was trying to think of that I'm pretty fond of as an off class. Let's see if I can remember in a timely fashion. No, I don't think I can. Maybe it was Malison. Maybe something like Eureka, just as like I do like that it draws cards just for committing.
I like Eureka a lot. It's not amazing because it's only a +1 to a skill test, but then it's like, ooh, I get to look at 3 and pick one. Like it's better than drawing because it's a filtered draw. So
yeah, and you mentioned working a hunch, and I do like that one even for primary seekers, or even for people who are taking it as an off class.
Sure.
And a lot of times it's like, well, do I need working a hunch because they're already good at it? But there's always at least one location in a scenario that either has like ridiculously high shroud or has some dumb effect for failing to investigate or or a cost to pay for investigating. So if I can just yoink it off, then that's always going to be useful, I think.
Just 2 resources and that's it.
Yep. Working a yoink. Yoinking a hunch.
Yoinking a hunch.
I'm not sure which one is better. All right, let's go to the next class then. Let's do Rogue now. Let's do Rogue.
See, now you're going in order, and now I appreciate it. Like Guardian, Seeker, Rogue. Rogue, Rogue has always been interesting because I've always described them as the class that just cheats. Like, they just cheat.
Sure.
And excuse me. So off-class Rogue, what you're looking at is you're looking at actions, you're looking at resources, and then they kind of have a suite of cards that can do everything else. Like they have stuff, they have answers to get clues, they have answers to get damage. You could argue that their damage options and their clue options aren't as good as the Guardian and Seeker options at the same level, but again, because they are focused on getting more actions, getting more resources, and obviously they have some pretty good mobility tools as well. You can still have a lot of fun with Rogue off-class if you're running weapons and stuff. So,
yeah, I definitely think like resources. Obviously, like when you say Seeker, probably the first thing is, well, I guess clues, but also card draw. But with Rogue, it's resources. The extra actions, like you mentioned, some of like the succeed by 2 stuff. If you are a investigator who start, like, say you're like a 5 intellect seeker, then that might be interesting, or a 5 combat rogue, because you probably succeed by quite a bit on certain tests. So what are some big rogue cards that you look to when you have off class rogue access?
This is tough because I play fewer investigators with off-class rogue access. Usually I just play a rogue in that case. But, gosh, do you remember when Leo DeLuca was the big shit, the big dog on campus? Like,
I do, yes.
I still like him, but he's just so expensive to get that free extra. But it's an extra action every turn. He's a decent off-class one. But again, I like to go more events and skills. So nimble. I know it's leveled up. It's a level 1, but momentum is amazing in anybody. Elusive. I look at elusive a lot because that's just a really solid level 0 card. I don't care who you are; it's still level 0. It's a lot of those. I look at Rogue for a lot of the like either win more or get me out of a tight spot cards. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah. You mentioned the skills, and I think Rogue has a really good selection of skills, both at level 0 and higher levels. So yeah, for sure. If I am an investigator who can do some evading, then Nimble, watch this can be a good resource generator. Quick thinking, again, if you're someone where you think you're going to be succeeding by a good margin on a lot of tests. But in terms of resource generation, Lone Wolf and Faustian Bargain are kind of some big ones. But I think, honestly, some of the cards that I take a lot in as off class are some of the favor cards where you can just pay to do like intel reports, decoy. Not so much small favor, but like intel report and decoy.
Yeah, small favor is kind of
dip into.
That's kind of the one that I take the least. Even in Rogues, like it's pretty much just in Preston. That's the only time I use it.
Yeah. I think like Tesla's stuff I can always find a home for that just unless it's an investigator where I think they're going to be running tight on money all the time, and then maybe not so much.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the allies a little bit, like we've done. We talked about the Manatee, about Leah DeLuca. I think the trouble there as an off class is that in Rogues often generate a lot of money, so it's not as big a deal to pay for Leo. Right. Whereas as an off class, it kind of depends on their money situation, whether they think they can pay for them or not.
I think the last time I ran Leo was in Leo, when we did Iron Man Carcosa, because it's like, oh, he costs one less anyway. So I ran him in Leo Anderson, and that was nice. Also because that was my, as I called it, party over here Leo deck, because it was me and like 4 allies at any given time. But other level 0 rogue allies, let's see, there's Gregory Gry, which he's solid. There's he's level 0, right?
Yep, okay. Level 0. You got Henry Wan.
I mean, you do, but I don't even think Henry Wan has Henry Wan. Like,
I think that's accurate. He doesn't include himself in his own decks.
I think rogue allies kind of run the same situation that Guardian allies kind of did, where it's like they play so strongly to rogue archetypes that they're not always and I could totally be wrong, because there's probably 1 or 2 I'm forgetting, but they don't fit as well as off class selections as you would hope. Like there's Dario Elamine, who's big money.
They're very specific to big money builds, yeah.
Yeah, and there's Joey the Rat, who is kind of like a big money and item dependent. Yeah. So I don't know, unless there's some I'm forgetting. You're the expert on this situation, so you could probably clarify.
No, I think you're right on that. I think the rogue ally situation is that a lot of the really bomb rogue allies tend to be the leveled up ones.
Yeah.
Like your Lola, for example, is the prime candidate, are kind of out of the reach, is off class for most investigators. The level 0s, there are a couple of strong ones, and then there's a lot that are kind of niche to specific deck types. I'm very fond of Lonnie Ritter, but mostly in Rogue itself, Rogue investigators themselves as like as a horror soak, basically.
Right.
But I'm trying to think if I've ever used her as an off class, and I don't think so, because those other investigators that are not in a rogue probably have better sanity options. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
In general, I think so.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Beyond allies, I think another kind of off-class rogue card that I do look to is Lucky Sig Case.
Oh yeah.
Again, if I think I'm going to succeed by 2 a lot, and it's really great card draw. Which, you should be doing if your base, like your primary base stat, whether that's intellect or combat, is high enough.
Right.
Or will, I guess. Yep. Any pet cards in Rogue that aren't as popular that you think might make good off-class options?
It might speak to the type of investigators I play, but I like contraband. Just the option to double the number of tokens on a card, on a supply or ammo tokens on a card. Like, that's great. But I also tend to run a lot of weapons, so... Otherwise... I'm really quickly, like, mentally going through level 0 rogue cards in my head. I like Cheap Shot. That's great for, like, a pesky enemy, like maybe a high health enemy that doesn't give you a victory point that you just want to leave behind. Just succeed on a fight test, and boom, you're also evading it. Like, that's really nice.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of... I think, like, the counterpart to Cheap Shot...
Slip Away.
God, I'm blanking on the name. Slip Away, yeah.
Yeah, that's great, too.
Something that can give you a boost on evade, and especially against hunters. What are some of my pets? Coup De Gras is one that I don't see people mention a lot, but again, I think I kind of like Tesla stuff, and just instantly dealing 1 damage and then getting a card is nice. I don't use it a ton, but there's certain investigators where I grab it as an off class. Sure. What else is a good kind of pet card for Rogue? I think we talked about most of them that I can think of. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to... I want to pause and talk more on Rogue. We do have a specific question in chat about Garrote Wire as an off-class. I have been mostly thinking of level 0, admittedly, in all our discussions. But yeah, as a level 2 off-class Garrote Wire. I mean, I'm a fan of Garrote Wire in general.
Yeah.
And a big supporter. I'm pro Garrote. I'm trying to... I feel like I have used it as an off-class, and I'm trying to remember who I put it in.
I don't think I have used that one in off-class, but I think the only time I used that one was in Tony, and I loved it.
Yeah. I think what might be tricky with Garrote Wire is that accessory slot, where a lot of investigators, their primary class is going to lay claim to that accessory slot. But if you're a main fighter, like say a Guardian, you're usually not using that accessory slot a ton. I could totally see using this to finish off enemies. Maybe I need to think about it more for off-class Guardian. Which there's not a ton, but... Okay, let's talk about Mythtic then. What does Mythtic give you?
This one... Okay, Mythtic preserves your player board.
Sure.
Yeah. First, I think when you're looking at off-class strengths, I think that's what you're looking at with Mythtic. Is a way to fight back in the Mythos phase. Because otherwise Mythtic is so, like, will dependent, like in the Mystic cards, like 4 Mystics, that they're not always great fits as off-class, but when they are, they fit really nice. Like, again, like Battle Mage Ashcan, for instance. So.
Yeah, I'm gonna go out on probably a fairly thick limb. I don't think it's too much of a limb. And say that Mythtic is probably the trickiest off-class to use for that reason, because so much of Mythtic is just built around, hey, you use your willpower to do other stuff.
Yep.
And if you're not a Mythtic, hey, you're probably not using willpower to do stuff in general. So yeah, it's really looking at, like, Ward of Protection jumps out, of course, immediately in some of the other councils.
Premonition, like I mentioned earlier.
Yep. And those are the ones that kind of are really kind of come to mind first.
Right.
I think the exception is those investigators that have high will. So non-mystics with high will that don't have good options for like investigating or combat. So my prime
Zoe.
example in the past is Zoe, who can suddenly use her will to investigate. Is kind of like a big example there. I guess you could have the opposite too, where you have a seeker with high will and mystic access who can use her will to fight.
Yeah, Daisy for sure.
Like Daisy's kind of the OG example, I think. Yeah.
Ashcan we mentioned.
Yeah.
Rex has 3 will? Do you use any mystic when you build for Rex?
I don't remember using any mystic.
Does anybody build for Rex anymore?
Yeah, that's part of the problem. I don't remember the last time I built for Rex. Yeah, it's been a while. Okay, so what are the big... I mean, we mentioned some of them already. Warder protection. Are there any beyond the cancels that kind of are...
I mean, it's tough because those are just so good because they don't rely on a stat most of the time. But...
Yeah, I think we mentioned Premonition already.
Yep. Level 0 mystics. Or even 1 or 2, I guess.
Yeah, I think I've used Holy Rosary as an off class on a few occasions.
Oh, sure.
Like, I just want like a sanity soak and get that boost my will.
Yeah.
Not super often, but I've done it.
Voltgloss brings up Promise of Power, which is great. Anybody loves +4 for a -2 at some point down the road. Like that's pretty good. I'm trying to think of again, the ones I'm running in Ashcan are still like high will, like because I'm running Sword Cane and I'm running Sixth Sense. So those still rely on will.
Yeah, it's kind of dependent on... I have run Fearless as an off class before.
Oh, sure.
If it's like, if I think my will's decent enough that I'll succeed on like a Treachery and then I can heal some horror.
Do you run Defiance in off class Mystic?
I still don't tend to run Defiance much in general, so no.
See, I like Defiance, and it's a 1 wild and you get to just turn off a token, but I guess I've never really... Oh yeah, Psychopath brings up Enraptured. That's a good one for off-class. That's, especially... Seeker can make a lot of good use off of Enraptured.
Sure. Yeah, mostly that Seeker-Mystic combo, I think. What about allies? These are similarly tricky, but I think there's some options here.
Yeah, well, they're tricky, but they also still kind of have their, like... The archetypes that Mystic plays off of are still kind of like universally good because, like, for instance, Olive, who I love, filters tokens. Yeah, I know, right? Like, she filters tokens, and everybody's going to be happy to do that. To have, even though you have to take 2, you still have the power to choose among 3. Like, that's so good. Alyssa Graham, maybe not as universally good as Olive, but still, like, to see what's coming. You know, and have an option to change it, even though it is adding a doom. I think those 2 are both great. And then there's obviously God damn it, Sean's guy. What's his name? Renfield, yes. But again, you know, the doom adding. I think other classes are probably more reticent to delve into that side of Mystic than straight Mystic is.
Sure, I don't think I've used Mystic Allies a ton for off-class, but Renfield's probably the one I've used the most.
Okay.
Just because resources are always good, but again, in particular, I've used it with Safina, who's like a high investigator, so it's like, okay, boost my will and get resources, sure.
Yeah.
And she has ways of getting rid of the doom, so a little bit cheating there, but but I've also used Renfield and like Patrice, for example.
Sure.
I guess again that's high will. So, but Alyssa Graham's a decent shout, I think. A +1 intellect never hurts, and you can peer, and 3 sanity soaks. So
yeah,
she's a pretty good package, I think, for off class. Are there any pet Mystic class cards that aren't as popular that you tend to grab for off class?
Well, I don't know if they aren't as popular, but Ethereal Form and Spectral Razor. And then I'll just throw the third one in there too, Read the Signs.
Sure.
Those 3, if you have a will of 2 or more, I think those are worth the card space, depending on your build.
It's like a +2, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've definitely taken all of those in one form or another, in one combination or another in off class for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Those are strong ones. I think most of the ones we've already talked about, like obviously I've taken Warder Protection as off class.
Right.
So I don't know if there's a ton of like other options. Again, Mystic is one of the trickier ones, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Forbidden Knowledge, but I guess that's mostly been as like a combo thing with certain investigators.
Right. Yeah, Forbidden Knowledge, I absolutely love it in Carolyn. But otherwise, I don't think I've used it that much as far as off-class stuff goes. Speaking of Carolyn, I'm trying to think of... She's probably the last time I built... I guess I built Patrice recently. What am I running in my Patrice deck? I don't even know anymore. But yeah, Mystic is tough because they have, like, much like Seeker, they have that selection of really, really good options that are low investment and don't ask a lot of you. And then everything else kind of focuses on, something more specific.
Yeah.
Gosh.
There's probably some like level 1 to 2 ones that I'm forgetting about that I'm spacing on.
Yeah.
But let's move on to... okay, go ahead. You got
I was going to say, Big Kahuna brings up Open Gate, which...
Okay, sure.
That's certainly an option. Yeah, it's scenario dependent. Also, I guess I'm a little more leery to do a full Myriad set of my off-class. I don't know why.
Sure.
Yeah, one of Open Gate, nice Super Toasty. That'll get you far.
You just go through and pop out the other side in an endless loop. All right, let's move on to everyone's favorite off-class Survivor.
the consummate off-class. Yep.
What does Survivor give you?
They give you a safety net, is what they give you,
sure.
Or they give you a comeback mechanic. Like those are what you're looking at primarily with Survivor.
Yeah, it's really because Survivor's always the oddball class, and that it's everyone else has kind of a niche, and not to say Survivor doesn't, but they just kind of have a little smattering of everything, and then they're heavy in on the like. Either rewarding you if you fail or protecting you from failing in one way or another, which is nice. So that one, I don't want to say it's tricky to build with Survivor because it's easy in the sense that there's a lot of options, but you got to make some decisions too about like, okay, I have all this stuff in my primary class to get stuff done. Like, do I dip into Survivor and grab a Lucky to prevent against failing? Do I grab a Live and Learn so I can try a test again? Like, these kind of cards that help protect against failure. Like, how much do you invest in those as an off class?
If I have access to Survivor, I'm usually taking maybe two cards that do that. And sure. I think you listed them both, Lucky and Live and Learn. I really like both of those.
Yeah.
Especially Live and Learn. Like, just do it again. Like, that's great.
Yeah, do it again with a boost. Yep.
Mm-hmm. I don't invest a whole lot into that. And even if
Sure.
I go main class survivor, I still don't. Because at a certain point, it's like, okay, I have all these cards that let me, redo something that I failed at. But none of them make me succeed in the first place. You know what I mean? Like, I still have that feeling where it's like, okay, I'm testing one down, but I've got to live and learn. I'm still one down the next time around. You know what I mean? Like, why wouldn't I just get something that has icons or throw a perception or something in there to make it just more likely to succeed the first time? So that's why I don't devote a whole lot of deck space to that. But it is nice to have the option.
Yeah, let's do a sidebar.
Okay.
And debate Lucky versus Live and Learn. Is there one that you favor, or does it really depend on Investigator?
I think, I don't think it really depends on Investigator necessarily. And this is talking strictly off class because obviously certain survivors will prefer one over the other. Because of just how they operate. So looking at it from off class, I think Live and Learn is your auto fail response. Like if you draw the auto fail token, or if you draw like a -H or something like that's. I think Live and Learn is more likely to get you for that sort of thing. Whereas Lucky is, I mean, you just missed it. So which one's? I think Lucky's more universally better because we tend to invest in our skills, and so we tend to be up 2, 3, 4, on a skill. And if we fail, then it's usually not by a whole lot, so.
Yeah, I don't think there's a clear winner for me. I think for me it is Investigator dependent. It's like Lucky has some clear advantages that. Well, I guess I should say Live and Learn has some clear disadvantages compared to Lucky, which is that you failed a test. So any tests where you're going to get punished for failing, whether it's Haunted or a Treachery or just Retaliate, just any of
Retaliate,
those things.
Alert.
Yeah, those are all going to punish you, and Live and Learn is not great for those. So Lucky has a clear advantage there. Live and Learn has the advantage in that it costs 0, which is... There's a non-zero amount. There's quite a few instances I can think of where I'm like, haha, joke's on you, Chaos Bag. I got lucky. I don't have resources.
Yeah.
And the other thing I like to do with Live and Learn is you can kind of take a test. And if there isn't a punishment for failure, you can take a test at say 0 or +1 and not commit a bunch to it. And if you succeed, hey, I succeeded. And if you fail, hey, Live and Learn, and then I'll get another chance and I'll get a +2 and I can make sure I succeed. So I use
Live and Learn a lot on investigate tests. Just trying to grab clues. Not that that's necessarily the best use for it, but that's just where I find the most use for it for my plays.
Yep. Okay, that was our small digression. Other big Survivor off-class cards. I do tend to dip into Survivor a lot for soaks, because that has some of the cheapest soaks around, like Leather Coat and Cherished Keepsake. Just anyone who has access to them, that's probably a good option.
Also, Survivor has probably one of the most used. I'm gonna go out there and guess one of the most used off-class allies with Pete Sylvester.
Oh boy, he's popular.
He's very popular.
Yep. Yeah, definitely right about. Survivor might be another one that has a lot of. I think Seeker still takes the championship here for off-class allies, but Survivor has Peter Sylvester. Madame LeBranche fits into a lot because of her. She's another kind of cheap 2 for 2/2. Not quite as good as Malison, but very good up there as a soak and her ability. And then what's her face? Granny. Granny
Orn
is another one that I've been using more and more, even as an off class. Yeah. Yep. Just to have that passive will boost, which isn't super common. I'm trying to think of other allies.
Not
I
on
guess
allies, it
Renfield,
isn't. No, yeah.
Renfield, and there's not many others that I can think of that give a passive will at level 0.
But Renfield's is conditional, right? Doesn't he need to have Doom on him?
Yeah, he needs to have Doom for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess Seeker takes the championship because they just have more allies and there's not as many level 0 Seeker allies. But yeah. They also have some interesting weapons too.
Yeah.
And like baseball bat. I'm just kidding.
Fire Axe for a long time was the go-to off-class weapon. If you had access to Survivor, you grab Fire Axe. I know.
Oh, yeah.
Again, going back to Rex, he made a lot of use out of Fire Axe.
Yeah, Fire Axe, Preston. There's been a long line of investigators who take Fire Axes off class.
I personally am a big fan of the Meat Cleaver.
Yeah.
In off class.
Like yeah.
Oh, I just love that weapon. It's so good.
Yeah. More recently, I've been using that in Jenny as off class,
sure.
but I think there's quite a few who can make use of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they have these kind of weird weapons that you can use. Because it's your bomb card that I'll include in off class a lot is track shoes.
Oh yeah.
If someone has the agility to make use of it, then
right, and it helps them get there too. So even a 3 agility character could still find use out of a track.
Yeah.
Shoes.
Yeah, that's the thing. You don't even need like super high agility. I think 3 is enough. Like I've taken it in Agnes, for example. It's like a 3 agility that you can bump up and make use of it. I think something like this is very specific to a specific type of build, but Dark Horse.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Dark Horse was the first one that we had that was like it inspired deck builds across all classes, like archetypes.
Yep.
Which is really cool. And yeah, that's that one like that. It does Survivor or not, like that card may as well be neutral. You know what I mean? Like it gets used so much regardless of class.
Yes. It's more like, do you want to build a Dark Horse deck or not?
Right, yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of if there are any like because a lot of the off class that we've talking about are assets. They have a lot of Survivor has a lot of really, really quality assets. I'm trying to think of some of their events are a little more hit and miss beyond Lucky and Live and Learn, but
I really like Look What I Found, obviously.
Sure. Yeah.
The No, I Didn't Fail.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And gosh, I can see the art. It's oh my god, what is it? It came out in Carcosa, and it's the one that gives you combat and agility boosts based on horror you've taken.
Oh, Fight or Flight.
Fight or Flight. Yeah. I like that one a lot too.
Yeah. Fight or Flight is depending on investigator, that's a good one.
Right.
I've dabbled in Hiding Spot for sure.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yep. I know Sean's pretty hot on that one.
Mm-hmm. I also love Winging It.
Uh-huh.
And I am a big fan. I just said I don't like to do Myriad off class for whatever reason, but I'm a big fan of Glimmer of Hope. Just because it's like, hey, free +1, free +1, free +1, and then you just pay 1 to get all 3 back in your hand whenever you need to. The only downside to that is it still costs an action to get them back, but like having those cards that exist literally just to boost any test you want, that's nice. That probably goes on my list of what I think are underrated off-class cards that I use. I think Glimmer would be one of them.
I think one that I've used as off-class more recently, because it's a more recent card, is Keep Faith.
Oh, yeah.
That's usually more specific to Bless builds, obviously, but just it's a really good Bless option of just fast, cost 2, toss 4 Bless tokens in the bag.
Right.
Yeah, so use that. People like Sister Mary and Father Mateo and anyone who's dabbling in the Bless. For sure. Okay, I think that's a pretty good look at Survivor and all of the classes. So let's talk a little bit about some of the weird cases.
Let's.
I think since we talked in depth about all the classes, we don't really need to mention anything specific for the investigators that get level 0 to 2 off class,
Sure.
unless there's anything specific you wanted to talk about there.
I think we covered it pretty good.
Okay. So let's talk about the weirdos. Let's talk about the Dunwich Splash investigators, the tried and true. I have to admit that these days building with Dunwich Investigator just makes my head hurt a little bit because there's so many options now. There's so many cards in the pool.
Yeah, for me it's just like, oh my god, like I need to make the best decision here. You know what I mean? Like the margin for failure is huge in these guys because they have access to all the level 0s. So that's why with Dunwich, I usually end up falling back on tried and true ones that I know work, like Desperate Duke, like Zoe pulling Mystic stuff, like Survivor Rex, just because I know that and like Guardian Jenny, I really like running the Guardian stuff. And actually with Jenny, what I do is I run physical training and arcane studies because arcane research. The Mystic one that you spend money to use. Because they each do their own skills. So, you know, with the one each of those out, I can buff any skill with cash. Right. So, like, Dunwich is it's too wide. It's too wide.
It's tough because you have all the options in the pool, at least if it's level 0. But then you have to cut it down to 5 out of 5.
Yeah, I know.
And I have a bone to pick with that 5 number because it's so awkward. Why can't it be 6? Because I want 2 copies of 3 cards. Why do I have to have one that's 1 copy?
Yeah, it's so weird.
It drives me nuts.
That's like a ruling that they made because, like, you can tell that was designed because of the deck size of 30 and to make it 25 and 5, rather than how many cards or how, 2 of a copy or whatever.
Yeah. Like, I swear, if it takes me, 10 minutes to build a Dunwich deck, I think 9 minutes is me deciding which card to have 2 copies of and which to be 1 copy.
Yep. I usually, with my Dunwich Splash, I usually get the 2 that I really want, and then I just go, okay, what's one that just kind of complements these or complements the deck in general
just
that I don't...
sprinkle it in there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think these days, since the selection is so big that it's driving me to madness, that I'm often using the Dunwich Splash to just do weird combos is kind of what I like the Ashcan Mage thing, like Zoe Bless build or Zoe Mage. Let's see, the more recent Jenny deck I did with Meat Cleaver and some of the other cards I have, which were a little bit offbeat. Yeah, so I think... I mean, also, they've been around... These are some of the oldest investigators in the game, so I've kind of gotten a little tired of, Dunwich Gator plus the 5 best cards that I can think of.
Yeah.
So just try to spice it up a little bit, I think, is mostly what I do. But... Yeah, I guess if you are just trying in general, if I have any advice for building the Dunwich Splash, is just being very focused. Yeah. And focus firing instead of just kind of grabbing a random hodgepodge of 5 cards. Like, what is one thing that you really want to get that you can't get in your class? And then just grab 5 of those from somewhere.
Yeah, go in with a plan. Otherwise, you're going to have analysis paralysis.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about some other weirdos. Let's talk about the traded build. So the ones who don't get an straight up off class, but they're built off a trait. So we have Mark with tactics, right? Calvin with spirit, Mateo with bless, to give a few examples.
These are so interesting because they're very dependent on obviously that traits representation. Because as we all know, Mateo was in a very bad spot for a very long time.
Sure
until recently, and now suddenly he's super good. And I know people who were like, oh, I loved Mateo. And yeah, like, but the thing is, he was just a mystic. You know what I mean? Like, he was just the mystic-ass mystic. He didn't have anything fun or special other than 5 experience at the start. And custom ammunition. That was literally the only blessed card you could
Mystic-ass mystic with God on top.
Oh, God. So they're, like... that. So it's... They're so weird, like... I don't know. So Mark, I mean, he's pulling primarily from Guardian. Like, Tactic is going to get you a lot of Guardian cards, but then there's also some Rogue cards that you can sprinkle in there. And then, like you said, Calvin as well. So I don't know. They're fun, but also I think they're relatively easy to build for because you literally just filter by that trait, and then even within that trait, some of them are going to be obvious picks, and some of them are probably not going to work necessarily.
Yeah, I guess that's true. In general, it's a little easier to build for them because their lists tend to be much smaller than, of course, Dunwich, but also the 0 to 2 off-class builds. Like, most of their lists, I would venture, are significantly shorter than those other lists. So, yeah, it's pretty much like Arkham DB, filter for trait, and pick from what's there. Yeah. And some of them have a better choice, a better menu than others. Like you mentioned, Mateo now is good. Calvin has gotten really a lot of spirit options these days. He has a ton of good spirit cards to choose from. Ursula is still a little tricky with the relics, like, and I think the problem with Ursula is mostly just her regular like seeker rig is just so strong that it's kind of like, okay,
like, why go relics?
Yeah,
exactly. Get 1 or 2 and call it good.
You've had the best, now have the rest. Yeah, so that's a tough one. Let's see. I think
even...
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, and even, like, traits, they aren't bound to specific classes, but at the same time, they tend to live primarily within a certain class. Like, again, I talked about how most of the tactics are in Guardian already. Tricks are mostly rogue things.
Sure.
So Rita is going to look red and green mostly. I can't think of a trick outside of rogue that she would want to take, you know what I mean? So they even still tend to look, when you're done building them, look like, you know, your basic main class 0 to 2 off class deck.
Right. Yeah, like Calvin's Spirit. Most of the Spirit is Guardian, so it kind of feels a lot like a Survivor Guardian. I think the big exceptions to what we're talking about are Amanda and Silas.
Yes, that's because they're skill based, and and I think the skills are more widely usable regardless of class.
Yeah, so
maybe an event would be.
Their decks look a lot more multicolored than the rest of the traded builds, I think. And they have a wider selection too, I think. But it is really honing in on one thing's skills, so it doesn't feel as overwhelming, I think, as like Dunwich, for example. You just kind of need to narrow down on those skills you want to use. Yeah, so I guess Dunwich on the spectrum is like on the end of like tear my hair out, I don't know what to do. And the traded builds are on the other end of like, it's all good. Like, I'll figure it out.
Right.
What about the variable builds, which are like not just one off class, but they can kind of pick a couple of low-level cards from a few classes. Like Finn can pick from Survivor and Seeker, but just a few. Carolyn, we talked about earlier. And Marie. So how do you kind of approach those ones? Like, do you just focus in on one of the classes they can pick from? Like, okay, this is my Finn Seeker? Or
I think
do you kind of get a smattering?
In all 3, so there's only those 3 that can do this. Finn, Carolyn, and Marie. And all 3 of those, I tend to go Seeker heavy. Just because I want to be able to reliably get clues. And all 3 of them have access to Seeker. So even though, like, Marie could do, you know, Sixth Sense or Rite of Seeking, because I have access to Seeker, I can now focus more on the enemy management part for willpower, and also maybe run like 1 6th sense or whatever. But yeah, I like to go yellow heavy for all 3 of those, just because it makes me feel better about the deck being able to operate well on its own.
Sure. I think for me it just varies for each of those 3. Like Finn, I had a go-to loadout for like years, like literal years, which was like big man on campus, logical reasoning, track shoes.
Oh, sure.
It has changed a little bit more recently, and I've tended to like change up big man on campus or logical reasoning potentially for something else.
Sure.
But I'm not really tied to Seeker or Survivor. It's just like, okay, I guess with Finn it tends to be either what can help me do evading things or what can counter 1 willpower. Help me there.
Yeah.
Carolyn is like, okay, I don't even know how to talk about Carolyn. It just depends, I think, on kind of how much I'm building her for investigating versus support. Is really, and then for Marie, I actually don't tend to leverage my off class a lot in Marie. Strangely, I guess it would be mostly Seeker because she's a pretty good investigator.
Yeah, and also like her stat line, like she's got 4 will, so the rest of the stats may as well be blank because she's got decent will, so she works with Mystic, you know.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about a couple of the other possibilities. So I guess the variable builds are in the middle of our spectrum where it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So then what we call in our show notes the custom off class, which is these are where you get to choose one of 3 classes at deck creation. So I think we're talking about Mandy, Tony, and Gloria. And they're all events or skills, right? If I remember correctly.
Yes, none of them can take assets. I really like this design, and I want to see more investigators use this because it's so... I love having that amount of control. Like, it's not quite Dunwich, you know, but it still gives you enough to where you can make different choices literally at deck creation about how this investigator is going to look based on player count, based on campaign. Like we've talked about Tony a lot. Tony with Seeker is really, really good, but also Tony with Guardian is really, really good. And I've run a couple games of Tony with Survivor, and hey, guess what? It's really good.
Yeah, I've liked all 3 of those combinations. So,
And then you get like Gloria mixed with Seeker, and it feels like the game is your bitch. Like it feels like you are in control of the game. And then you've got Mandy, who can take Rogue, and Scott will always talk about, 3 aces Mandy. So it's just such a cool way to approach class design or investigator design, like what classes they represent, by giving you that choice. Be like, hey, it's going to be Rogue, but then you can pick Seeker, Survivor, Guardian. Pick one of those and get a few events and skills.
Yeah, I like that it gives you choice and to shape the investigator depending on what you want to do. But then once you make that choice, it limits you.
Yep.
So it kind of focuses your deck building. So it gives you the best of both worlds. I think what's different here with these ones is I tend to often make the choice and my building here depending on player count more so than almost any of the other types of deck building we talked about. Because I often tend to think, okay, am I true solo? Okay, I might pick a class that's going to help me like short my weaknesses, like investigation, for example. But if it's multiplayer, all of a sudden I may lean on Tony Guardian because I'm just going to kill stuff. So, yeah, I think I really take player count pretty heavily into account when I'm choosing my off class for these choose your own adventure types.
And also they're only event and skill, like they're not assets, but at the same time, earlier in the episode I did say that I tend to build event and skill heavy anyway for off class most of the time. So it just fits into that, which is nice.
Yeah, which I'm glad they put that limitation. Like, of course,
Yes.
at first I was really like, I want the asset. But then it just kind of feels like you just turned into one of the 0 to 2 off-class builds. And this has really forced me to, like, take a look at events that I might not normally take a look at or including.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden I'm like, okay, that might kind of take the place of this asset that I wish I had access to. So
Right.
I think that's a cool feature of that. All right, the last type of deck building that we have are the evolution builds, where I think this is going to be a weird one because I still find these to be weird. You start level 0 in one class, and then so you're not messing around with off class at all at level 0. But then levels 1 through 5, all of a sudden your quote-unquote off class becomes your main class.
Yeah, I would argue that the off class is the level 0
Right.
in this sort of build.
So you build an entirely off class deck and then shift
and
to
then
your
you have
main
to
class.
work into your main class. Oh,
Yeah.
and then Big Kahuna in chat says that usually they get 5.
Sure.
Obviously,
So you can
level 0.
you can dabble a little bit and wait.
Obviously, our only experience with this is Norman so far.
True.
And I have been very vocal in how much I do not like Norman. Sean has been very vocal in how much he loves Norman.
Yeah.
However, I still have that Norman standalone build that I really, really want to try out, and that's the Cursed Norman questions every decision he made in life is the name of the deck because it's such a mouthful.
Yeah.
But I think it'll be really fun to try that. So these are I don't have any insight on this, or I don't know how I do this because it's so weird.
I know. I feel like we need Sean or Scott for this because Norman is also one of my least played investigators. I think what I will say is I feel like more than any other investigator, to get the most out of these, you kind of need to build your end deck first and work back.
Yeah, I could see how that, and I don't do that, so that would probably be why I got turned off to Norman pretty quickly.
Yeah, because then you are almost building it like, okay, with Norman, I'm building a Mystic deck with off-class Seeker.
Yeah.
Obviously with the restrictions he has on levels and stuff. But you build that kind of end deck, and then you can kind of work backwards from there to make your level 0 and decide what your splash is going to be, and then decide what your upgrade path is going to be. But I think that's going to make it feel a little bit less like, okay, I built this Seeker deck to do things, and now I have to upgrade into Mystic? Like, what am I going to do now? Yeah. But my hunch is, too, the Seeker to Mystic transition might be a little bit awkward, and that as we play with some of these Edge of the Earth investigators, we may get to really stretch out what this kind of evolution build can do.
I mean, yeah, but I also think of Lily, and Lily is what? She's Mystic into Guardian? Like, that's also kind of a weird... I think a deck build like this that includes Mystic is going to feel weird. Because, like we said, Mystic is so, like, I do everything with willpower. But now suddenly I'm becoming a Guardian, so it's like, well, what do I... How does... Where do I go? Like, how does that transition work? It seems like it's... At one point, you just have to go like, nope, okay, from now on, it's all combat, or it's, you know what I mean? Like, I'm getting rid of the willpower stuff. Whereas someone like Bob, who goes Survivor into Rogue, those mesh together a little better, you know what I mean? To where you can still do a lot of the same stuff, and you're not changing your strategy 100%. That's just a guess, but...
So if I'm hearing you right, your central thesis is Mystics ruin everything.
It's that Mystics are really good at being Mystics. And nobody
Hi, Sean,
else...
as you're editing this.
Fuck you guys. You're wrong. Play more Mystic.
And nobody else is really good at being Mystics. And so it's more of a 180-degree turn. But yeah, no, you're right. Mystics are awful. No one else... they're on an island unto themselves. I say that, and like my second favorite investigator is Mystic. It's Luke, but
yeah, sure. Yeah, I think it's just some awkwardness there and trying to like reconcile what Mystics do, which is so much different than everyone else. But I think it's doable. I'm sure there are lots of people who can make some amazing Norman builds, but it just, I think it takes a lot of planning. And that might be true of the others in this category. All right. Any last thoughts on splashing off class?
No, my takeaway is just I want to see more of the custom off class. I want to see more of the pick it as you go. Although I am excited to get, for the first time in a while, I think, to get an investigator box where every investigator has the same type of off class, like the same type of deck building rules. Because I think the last 3 boxes, they were kind of all just all over the board, I think.
Yeah.
And it makes it harder for me to remember who does what.
I think by the end of Edge of the Earth, you will really be able to tell how we feel about the evolution style.
That's true.
For sure. Are there any... Here's a last random question. Are there any kinds of deck building that they could do that you can think of that we haven't seen yet? We have traits. We have these different combinations of classes.
They could do it. I mean, we kind of have it, but you could do a class that can only use assets from one class and only use events and skills from another.
Sure.
But the levels are more open. I don't know. You could do something like that. You could do something really weird with levels and do like a half and half where it's like you can take levels 1 through 3 or 0 through 3 of this class and levels 3 through 5 of your off class or whatever. You know what I mean? But
yeah,
I don't know if we'd see anything quite that crazy. I think what we're seeing now with Norman and Lily is kind of what to expect when it comes to the leveling into a new class.
Yeah, it's hard. I asked the question, but it's hard for me to I'm sure there's possibilities, and the design team is so creative, they'll probably come up with something, but obviously there's a ton of other traits that could be drawn upon. I don't know. Yeah. You can only pick cards starting with the letters R through S as the first letters. Alphabet based. Art based. You can only have
art based. Yes. Have
cards that have footwear in them.
Levels 0 through 5 cards with a combat icon.
My favorite deck building are still the Barkham Horror Investigators, of course. Like anything that looks like it smells weird. All right. Shall we tentacle time?
Yeah, so that'll move us into tentacle time. So, Ian, what have you been doing in your off time?
Well, I do have something new, which is the new Life is Strange game came out. Life is Strange True Colors came out a couple days ago, I think. Sometime last week. And I've definitely talked on the podcast before about how huge a fan I am of the Life is Strange series, one of my favorite games ever. Of course, there's always a little bit of nervousness when a new game comes out, when it's like, are they going to be able to maintain the things I like about it? Yeah. So far, I'm not super far. I don't even know how many chapters are in the game, but I'm like partway through chapter 2, and I'm loving it. They pretty much hooked me within the first 5 minutes, which is like, okay, job done. They've improved a lot of the graphical, like, animation stuff, which, to be honest, I don't really care about that much in games compared to... I know for a lot of people that's a huge thing. But it is nice. It improves the experience for sure, and the story is good so far. So I definitely recommend people checking out Life is Strange True Colors. The nice thing is it's not following... The past 2 games followed like an episode release model where you kind of have to wait every couple months for the next episode. And this is just like dumping the whole thing on you at once. So you can kind of play at your own pace. I've heard it's not like super long compared to a lot of modern games. Again, me personally, I don't care about that because I often talk about how I wish games were shorter. like having a family and wanting to be able to actually complete games means that shorter games actually have a much higher chance of me completing them. So yeah, I'm glad to experience what is there, and if it's not super long, that's fine with me.
I haven't played any of the Life is Strange, and I started watching an LP of the first one back when it came out, and I watched the first episode, and that was as far as I got. So like 30 minutes in, not even. I don't know why. It never. I'll go and play the first one, especially if you love it so much. Like I should give it a try.
Sure. I can't guarantee that you'll love it. It's a very specific thing,
right?
A kind of very specific genre, but yeah, I think it's one of those games where people either bounce off of it and okay, I'm not sure why people like that, or they freaking fall in love with it and can't stop talking about it.
All right. For me, I mean, I am reluctant to make my tentacle time the same as it was last week, but I think that's what's going to happen.
But you're going to do it anyway.
But I think I'm going to do it. Aliens Fireteam Elite. I'm still playing it. I'm still playing it almost as much as I was last week. I think I don't play it every day anymore. I think I maybe play it every other day, but it's still really good. They released a new class, the Phalanx, which is a tank. They have a shield, and they use shotguns and handguns. So it is everything I wanted, and more. So my old main class of tech is now pushed to the second place slot, and I use the Phalanx as my main now. It's really fun, guys. Again, Left 4 Dead style, but in the Aliens universe, and I play it on PC, so if you play on PC as well, talk to me, send me a message on Discord, and let's get some games in, because it's super fun.
I still need to try it.
Yeah, and I was surprised that they released their first, content patch 2 weeks after release. So that's a good sign. I hope they keep up with the pace, but I haven't seen any news yet, but Phalanx just came out, so it might be a few weeks before we see anything else. That's pretty much... Oh, I will mention, too, I'm also in another play coming up. It opens at the end of October. It's Wait Until Dark, which was written, I think, I want to say, in the 50s originally. I have the script right here. What was it copyrighted? 2015. Nope, that's not right. It was long before that. But anyway, they made it into a movie in the 60s with Alan Arkin and Audrey Hepburn. It's a really good production. It's about a blind woman who is home alone and has to deal with 3 con artists who are trying to steal diamonds. In the play it's diamonds, in the movie it's heroin. That she doesn't know is in her house. But it's really good. And the tension and the kind of the situation of she's blind, how is she able to defend herself against these individuals? But it's really exciting. I played the character. Yeah, I play the character named Mike, who was played by Richard Crenna in the movie. And my character is the one who, everyone, the audience and the actress believe I'm a good guy until about halfway through. Then the audience learns that I'm not a good guy, but the lead actress still thinks I'm a good, that sort of thing. So I get to do a fun little,
that's fun,
where I get to play with expectations and all that, which is always great.
Spoilers.
Yeah, spoiler. I kind of figured that anybody who's listening to this probably isn't going to see the show. Maybe not. Sure. I don't know. But at the same time, streaming still could be a thing. We don't know yet. Things could change between now and then. So if it does stream, I'll make sure I talk about it more and provide links and all that. But I think that's going to do it for our episode 114. Off-class discussion. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode. As always, you can email us at mythosbusterspod@gmail.com if you have any feedback or show topics that you want to suggest or anything like that. You can leave us a voicemail at I had the where's the 203-493-MYTH. That's 203-493-6984. And thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you on our next episode, which is episode 115, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.